Hey, you groovy kids. Never mind. Hey, you groovy kids. Welcome to the 1970, where your leader is currently occupied. Um, and how about we finally move forward? How about you all finally feel free to join me here in the year 2020? And before I go into this video, I would like to preface this statement or this video by saying that all of this content and more can be found in my Twitter page or my Twitter blog, Humanist Philosophies, where I talk about all of this content in this video and much, much more. And have been blogging extensively about not the Tucker Carlson part that I have commented on YouTube about, I believe, but I have not talked about on Twitter yet, but will. And I have talked very much about and in depth about the last part of this video over the last couple of hours, especially. But anyways, going into detail about this, as you can find on my blog, Humanist Philosophies, that is better than this and probably better laid out and without the stuttering, awkward mess in a darkened room that I am. You can see my blog, Humanist Philosophies. Okay, now then, moving forward. The issue concerning transgender athletes and transgender people's rights to play or to be allowed to and able to play sports in America the way that they should be allowed to, and in the way that is a human right and a right for them as American citizens that should be capable of doing all the same things as anyone else does, that should extend to, but often does not, to bathrooms and to bathroom use, to locker room use possibly in the future. I'm not saying that because that could get difficult. That could become difficult. But certainly bathrooms, fucking sporting events, beauty pageants, any damn thing, anything a female can do, or a male can do for that matter, a transgender person should be able to do as well. Now, don't you agree? If you're a humanist and or progressive, I hope you do. But here in America, that's not the case. In Tucker Carlson, someone who is in some cases more correct, at least over on the conservative side of things, and I'll move into the issue with both progressives or regressives and conservatives at the end of the video later on. Stay tuned. But especially progressives, but conservatives and progressives. But he is right about some things. But he talks about rights to women, for women to play exclusively female sports, but by the way, again, in many cases are not only promoted over male sports in some cases for the rights of women, equal rights, keep that in mind, equality in their right to play sports, but also is funded in part by taxpayer dollars in a supposedly, according to feminist patriarchal society, of course that's a subjective word that can mean a lot of things, but a patriarchal society that is, I'm guessing, supposedly male dominant by not only biological male taxpayers, but transgender taxpayers as well, specifically and especially transgender taxpayers have to pay for these biological females to play these sports that they don't want to let transgender people into. And here's my problem with that. First off, let me state, and I'm not saying that there should not be sports specifically for female. I'm not saying that. But if you really wanted to be a hard-nosed realist and a fucking kind of social Darwinian asshole about this, you can make this simple fucking point that the entire point of sports in general actually is to see who the better athlete is, or to see who the best really is. And if you can't even compete against a transgender female, who you could argue to some extent is, first of all, is feminized, is like a female in appearance, actions, and in every way, and thinks they are female. Second of all, in some cases are not only, you could argue, not only figuratively emasculated, but some of them actually do surgically or physically castrate themselves, literally emasculated, and who are taking estrogen. And if you know anything about estrogen use, puts you at a disadvantage because you actually have testosterone inefficiency problems. You don't have enough testosterone. That is to say, you have less testosterone than a female, who in some cases have bone problems and other issues as a result of this. If you're saying that those people cannot compete against you, while at the same time many of these females are taking the same thing males take, and that is male testosterone pills and treatments, but male growth hormones, that even then you still cannot compete against such top-notch athletes as transgender females with testosterone deficiency, then I would argue that maybe we shouldn't even have women's sports in the first place if you want to be that way. because you're the one discriminating against transgender women here. You definitely are. And again, that is the problem. You want equal rights until it's time to give equality to someone else. And in this case, it's not even biological males. It's freaking literal transgender women. And I'm sorry, but they are a notch below you in the oppressed category, okay? So understand that now. There's no debate. When you can't even use a bathroom in many states in this country, you are the more oppressed group. And that's even true not only for male to female, by the way, but even for female to male, who I would imagine to be, and I believe was probably the greater portion of the people kicked out of the military, because I don't think most people would transition to female to be in the army. But some female transgender females or men that became women were in the army, and you have a lot more probably women that became men in the army, and they were kicked out. So they're more oppressed. So you now have a more oppressed group that, again, you're arguing should not have the right to fucking play sports, or if they do play sports while taking estrogen, they should have to compete against men who, by the way, are already larger and more stronger than them in many cases, who are now taking male growth hormones. And if you certainly want, then they are. And while they have to do this now while taking estrogen, because for some reason it wasn't fair enough that these oppressed people, that in this small minority was already competing against females, top-notch female athletes who were taking male hormones in many cases, while they took estrogen and had estrogen deficiency problems. And you don't think that's an oppression and a discrimination against transgender females. So what about those females, those transgender females? So here you see transgenderism. First of all, you see feminism or feminism for what it is, not only on the advancement or a movement or program for the advancement of females who identify as female, but for the biological sex of female. And again, biological sex, something nobody can help. So that these transgender females who are biologically male, by the way, born male, cannot help their biological identity, and they cannot help their biological gender or biological sex that was male. So, but you now are kicking them out of the damn sporting industry, and you don't want them to compete against women because women might lose. And there is no chance or no possibility that these emasculated biological males who are effeminized and female might lose, might win rather, not because they were the better athlete, but simply because they were born male. Do you know what a pile of steaming horseshit that is? So then you have that problem. And then furthermore, you have the issue of this is right, you are right, Tucker, when you refer to them as biological males, because this is not only, whether transgender or not, this is not only an issue of discrimination against transgender females, a far more oppressed group than females or even men, or males for that matter, who cannot in many states, in many places, even use a bathroom, and who have to fear for their life just for being who they are. This is an issue that is biological males. So you're throwing the Republican Party, by the way, and Tucker, the supposed guy who's talking about feminism and everything, he's now going to help the feminists throw the transgender females and ultimately biological males under the bus here in this case, as he has before with biological males and men and about different issues. But you're going to throw them under the bus in the name in league with females. And this is the Republican Party. The freaking people now want to oppress the transgender female in league with females. So I guess we know what female is more oppressed, and it's the one that was born male. And I'm sure that's just a coincidence. But beyond that, it's not just sporting events here. And by the way, I'll talk about that more at the end of this because it ties in together with the end of this. And the fact that we are still living in the year 1970, and that's part of the problem. But ultimately, it comes down to this. You have, or pretending we do when we don't. But the point is, transgender females not only cannot, in many cases, by the way, compete in sporting events that you could argue, well, they have an unfair competitive advantage, even though that's absurd if you know anything about the issue. But they can't even compete in beauty pageants. And I have seen some of these same conservatives, these same brain-dead conservative men who want to treat women like infantilized or child-like adults, almost like adult children, when they are not that, and when they are the same, ultimately, is an adult man, and they are equal to adult men, and they are your equal, and they are adult human beings capable of doing many of the same things you do, if not everything that you do. They should be treated that way. You want to treat them like children and like a child, and that's part of the problem. And then meanwhile, you have them arguing they're superior and wanting more and more and more, while other people, including transgender people, have less and less and less. And the ultimate argument here is this. these turf feminists, along with these turf or almost this almost xenophobic movement of feminists to only care about a specific type of female, biological female. And in my opinion, there is a racial bias in some cases, even towards white females, but certainly biological females against trans females and transgender females. These females and these conservative men, white men like Tucker Carlson, who want to oppress females, are a big part of what the fuck is wrong with females in this country, and a big part of what is wrong with the country and what's wrong with the Democratic Party. Because ultimately, at the end of the damn day, you've hurt females. And then you see these same conservatives, and you have lowered the value of female sports. But not only that, you see these same conservatives, as I have talked about before. I can't think of the guy's name. He's on Amazing Atheist. Not Amazing. I like him. I'm not talking about this. It has nothing to do with him. But there was a guy, he was a black guy called the Amazing something, and I can't think of his name. And he was a conservative, actually. And he was a black guy, and he was on Alex Jones's channel, I believe. But I can't think of his name. But he also was discriminating against. I saw this last year, and it was like a year old then. But he was talking about a woman in a transgender contest. And of course, we know Trump prohibited or tried to prohibit a transgender woman from being in one of his Miss America contests, I believe it was. And of course, she sued, and a feminist helped her, and I'll give her credit for that. It was Gloria Albright. I think it was not. What was her name? The feminist, not Gloria Steinem, who's another woman. Anyways, the point is, she won, and she was in the contest, and ultimately, of course, she lost. And was one of the first, if not first person, eliminated. And I'm sure that was a fair contest, by the way, that our president had, where he would not allow a transgender woman, a beautiful woman, by the way, as attractive as any other woman on the stage, in my opinion, compete in the contest. And of course, she's doing the finger snap and everything. And, you know, to her, it's like a big coming out of the closet moment. Not coming out of the closet, but I'm here and I'm a female and kind of proud moment. And of course, to steal that from her because of male privilege, right? And again, these are the Republicans that are supposed to hate women, but here you're discriminating against a woman, yeah, but only because she was born a biological male. So that's interesting to me. But I just find that interesting. And again, you're lowering the value of women's sports and making it one more reason why we shouldn't even have fucking female sports. Because if you're going to argue that, well, transgender females are that much more talented, I mean, Jesus fucking Christ, they're already basically emasculated. They're on estrogen pills. They're effeminate. They're goddamn, they have testosterone deficiency issues. And I mean, they're one out of the crowd in most cases. And then you don't even want to let them in beauty pageants. So the point is, and that's a female activity where, if anything, they're at a disadvantage. But the point is, if they can't do that, then why in the fuck even have female sports? If there's such a point you can't even compete against them without losing every damn time, then maybe you shouldn't even have a fucking place in sports if they're that bad. Or we should consider it almost like we should consider it like the Special Olympics if you're that low in the fucking ladder of fucking sporting athletic ability. But if you're going to argue that really you shouldn't have female sports, or you shouldn't have separate the damn genders, if you're, you know, especially if you think these transgender women can compete against men, why can't they women? And why do you separate the damn genders? I mean, you could ask that, because if you're not wanting to do what's right and do the humane thing and the progressive thing and give these transgender females a place to play sports and a right to play sports for themselves, then what right do you have to steal from or take from the transgender woman? And if you do that, then why do females have the right? Because if you can just kick transgender females out of the sports and not give them a separate place to be able to play sports the same way as the female and the people who play female sports have, then what right do you? Then why have female sports? Because that's based on humanist ideals and progressive ideals of the other guy matters too, and it's their right to be able to play sports. That's what this is based on, and you're robbing that from and stealing that from these transgender females. So there's that. So if you're going to argue that, then there shouldn't be any women's sports, because these women are just as much female as any other female, and they have they just have, if they are in many cases, they work, of course, harder than any woman who did nothing more than fall out of her mother's vagina, already a girl. They had to work hard to become girls, and they self-identify as girl, or as a female rather, and they are even legally identified or legally recognized as a girl in some cases. So why can't they then fucking play female sports? It's only right. And if you can't do that, then there shouldn't be any female sports. And either, goddammit, you can compete against the men, or there just shouldn't be any women in sports. Because, goddammit, if that's okay, Why not that? And I don't see any men doing biological men in fucking bikini contests. Do you? So that's a fully on, and this is go back to what I'm talking about at the end of this. That I have to hurry up and do because I don't know how this works. But the point is, it's full on beauty pageant modeling career for women. The men get fucked out of the bikini, and then the transgender people are going to get screwed out of both. And you're not going to let them be in bikini contests, and you're not going to let them be in sports, women's sports either, even though you know they can't play against the men. So you're discriminating against transgender people, and ultimately men too, in some ways. Beyond that, on the issue of genital mutilation or child circumcision of male infants, that something else that has been illegal for females for over 20 years in this country. Someone said that he was against the procedure, probably would not be doing that to his child. But on the other hand, thought it was not a real issue and no one convinced him it was a real issue. So again, let's keep this in mind. This procedure, this surgery of child genital mutilation, male genital mutilation kills between, on average, 50 to 120 children a year, and has almost every damn year since we have been practicing this in large numbers, beginning, I'm guessing, back in the 40s, if not before. And as of last year, killed over 90 children, 90-something children, I forget how many. And the year before that, or prior to that, had killed 80-something, so it was up last year. And you want to allow that to, you don't think that's a huge issue. At the same time, and in the same country, by the way, female genital mutilation of any kind, or any kind of female genital modification, at least being performed on a minor, has been outlawed. And was outlawed, again, without the female's consent, not until 18, or done under the age of 18, has been outlawed since 1997, over 20 years ago. And again, you don't think that's a problem, but yet you're not going to do it to your kid. Okay, we'll go figure. And again, I give you credit for looking outside the norm and be able to think for yourself. And I'm sure our people like me talking to you about that and messaging you and talking to you probably helped you look out of the norm and not do that to your kid, because you were able to research and you have the brains to research, and good for you, and not do something just because you thought it was the norm or you were used to it. But that's still not good enough. You need to go and research, help other people, I think, and act. And you certainly shouldn't be saying this isn't an issue, because if you're not going to do it, then goddamn it, maybe some other person needs to know not to do it. So you should do more to stop this from happening, because it is wrong. And if you can make it illegal, you can at least educate people. But that goes back to my statement in the final part of this video. We're living in the year 1970, and that ultimately our politicians on the left and right, and that is the problem with many of these feminists, and it's both because that was the last time they were young, and or not only young, but probably lower class, lower income, or on the lower income bracket, and have actually lived among people. They're living in a time period where females were oppressed. So they're dealing with gender issues as it was in 1970 and not realizing things change. And then you have people like Ruth Bader, or whatever her name was, Ginsburg, who is 90-something years old and probably seen out on a lot of other stuff. And she's running the Supreme Court and voting on this shit. So you have a 70-something-year-old woman voting on gender issues and thinking of gender in the same way that she thought of it in 1970, if not before. Then Biden, who was running for office in the 1960s, or Nancy Pelosi, who first took office in 1979 and lived much of her life prior to the 70s, or prior to 1979. And I probably would think of things in a more negative direction having to do with men back then, because men did have more rights and more privilege in many cases than women did. But even back then, I don't want to make it look like it's an issue of black and white, because it wasn't, because men still had to serve in the Vietnam War, where millions of men, or hundreds of thousands of men at least, in the total of the Vietnam War drafted, thousands, if not tens of thousands, were killed. And only men. And male genital mutilation that I'm bitching about now was also still a problem even back then, and more of a problem because more happened. It happened more, and I think at some point it reached 70-something% in this country. Now it's slightly above or under a half, probably slightly under a half of the country. So you're looking at it the way it was in 1970, and even back then there was a lot of male problems, but men probably did have it better. So I don't blame you. And many decisions and ideals and things feminists do and have, and Democrats do, make sense had you been living in the year 1970. Republicans' ideals are just largely stupid anyway, but even some of their ideals, such as taxing people less, made more sense when in the 1970s, or the year 1970, you could argue, or could have argued rather, that, well, okay, we're taxing people a lot more per average in the 70s, and even companies and corporations had not taken over other companies and put everyone else out of business, and mom and pop was still in business, or mom and pop or whatever, they were still in business. So all of a sudden it makes sense that, okay, we're going to tax companies less. So even that makes sense. But now you're talking about far lower taxes, especially on the rich and on the top wealthy earners. And the tax breaks that we have don't apply as much to whatever is left of the middle class. And that's largely the lower part of the middle class. And taxing the rich more would probably take a burden off of them, and largely what would be a tax on corporations. And of course, part of the motivation for that is greed, and it's the same selfish interests that motivate feminists. A lot of them, and that is a lot of them have made money off talking about gender issues, and to a much smaller extent, in some cases, even racial issues, the same way they would have in talked about it in the year 1970. So they have made a lot of money off that. And also there is a bias because many of these people are female. And on the same note, some of these men, if they're not already making money off it too, they are looking at it like the way Reinstein was while he raped women, by the way. Then if they're not doing that, then what they're doing is they're looking at it is the same way that they would have looked at it in the year 1970. Yeah, women are oppressed. But we're not in again, the problem is we're not in the year 1970. So again, feel free to join me in the year 2020, and let's actually tackle some of these male issues and look at them, and not treat gender or even race the way we would have in the 1970s, because we have moved forward and have progressed already a great fucking deal in 50 goddamn years. And you need to understand that. You were already beginning to change even then. So you're not alive 50 years ago. And then the problem is now that you're raising these rich idiots raised the younger people to think like they did in 1970. And then many of these same fucking people now, the people that they taught, rather, those same fucking people are now becoming the professors and taking over and teaching the new kids. So that they end up thinking the same damn thing, and they're being brainwashed and preconditioned to the year 1970. And the only damn way really out of this, in my opinion, for anyone or for anybody, really rather, is to simply move and progress the fucking youth out of the year 1970. Because whether you like it or not, you cannot live and be a progressive and still live in 1970 or 50 fucking years ago, rather. And even if goddamn it, and not only that, for Democrats or Republicans, it doesn't make any sense to talk about gender or economics or even, like I said, to a lesser extent, race, the same way you would have in 1970. It just doesn't make sense, and you can't have a progressive country and do that. And you're going to misrun and misunderstand and fuck up every damn thing. You're just going to fuck up everything, basically, and mismanage and misconstrue shit and fuck up everything, and they have done that. And now we're talking about whether or not what race you talk for cartoon characters. It's gotten to be absurd, because you will not fucking look back at that and say, yeah, you know, things have changed then. There's really no sexism against women, and probably are some against men now. And second of all, there's not nearly as much racism, even racism, against other groups. And what little racism there was, we are starting to get rid of. Now, police brutality is still a much more complicated issue and does affect Black people much more. And that's one reason why I was massively in support of that, or dealing with that issue. But the point is, rather, it still isn't 1970, and you can't treat every damn thing the way you would have in the year 1970. And Republicans can't continue to run economics. And like, if you look at what they think and consider the idea that they think it still is 1970, in actuality, if you look at it that way, they are Nazis. By the way, the left wing isn't wrong. But also, even the rhetoric of LGBTQ, considering that being a bit more of a modern issue, they're absolutely stupid and close to Nazis about that also. But that doesn't mean the left wing is right, and they're still dealing with problems like it's the year 1970, and they don't want to talk about male issues or act like males have problems, and they're still talking about male privilege and not female privilege. They exist in some cases. And I would like to talk about male child genital mutilation or circumcision and issues considering transgender sports and transgender people playing in sports and other real issues, and why don't females serve in frontline combat in the military if they join, and why are females not subjected to the draft, and why are for example, men not given any paternity leave in the case of having a child, while women are given many, many months, and so on and so forth, like Becky Lynch, who, by the way, is being paid $1 million and so forth. It's absurd. And then you want to talk about everything like it's a one-race streak and only men get the privilege. It's nonsense. So anyways, that's my point. We have got to leave the year 1970 behind and move forward and join me here in the year 2020, where you can actually make some good progress and do something positive. Whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, this is something you should ultimately support. P666.